afternoon. This is Dr. Ted Loder and Dr. Jan Bravo, and this is the World Puja Network. And we're hosting this afternoon the World Puja program, Conversations with Dr. Steven Greer. Today is going to be the second part of a, shall we say, two-part series, or maybe three-part series, but at least two-part series on the Disclosure Project. Last week, or several weeks ago, we discussed some of the recommendations from the Disclosure Project, which happened a little over 10 years ago. And we sort of reviewed all of those and kind of reviewed a little bit of the status of where we are. Today, what we want to do is discuss the implications for scientific and technological advancements after we have open contact with ET civilizations. Now, this is an interesting point to make here. It is felt by many that disclosure has occurred already, and in many senses, disclosure has occurred. The National Press Conference 10 years ago with the Disclosure Project really put out a massive amount of information to the world's public about the reality of extraterrestrials visiting this planet. However, and since that time, many countries have declassified information, which has been just bolstering the whole disclosure movement. However, Jan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, this is a very important point that you're making, because we've seen a clear upshot in people who have looked at the evidence, and individuals, the public has looked at the evidence, and we've gone from perhaps 60% to over 80% of people who believe in life in other areas of the cosmos, that extraterrestrials have visited Earth, and that there has been contact. So it's interesting that there has been a very positive response to disclosure as far as the public. And we can just look at these numbers and these polls and what people say. Interestingly, the distinction that you're making about the press and world leaders not acknowledging this, officialdom, as it were, is is certainly a problem. And we know that there is, unfortunately, a lot, as has been said in past programs, some of the reasons for the suppressions, the special interest, that don't serve this planet well. But officialdom has been slow to react and has been actually actively suppressing things. And this is a problem. And so I think the distinction you're making is very important. Let me let you go ahead.
Yeah, what we're going to do today is discuss, we will assume that although disclosure has happened, as Jan has mentioned, in certain sectors of the world population, it has not happened in the world's leaders and the media. They have not openly, it is not accepted and openly discussed by world leaders and the media, and that is the distinction that we're making. So what we're going to do today is we're going to assume, for the sake of argument, that disclosure at that level has not yet occurred, but what will happen when it does occur? What changes will there be in many of the technical areas and some other areas? And so this is our topic today. It's going to be kind of a fun. It's a bit of a speculation and based upon some real knowledge and some speculative knowledge. Let's put it that way. So they're based on the analysis of the combinations, I said, of technologies needed to visit the Earth. So if they're here, then obviously they have the technologies to get here. And since they are here, those technologies exist. And so make no bones about it. We are not speculating on their being here or not. That is a non-issue. ETs are visiting, have visited, and are visiting our planet, and have been for a long time, period. That is a done deal. Now, what we're trying to do here is speculate on technologies and other changes that will occur as the result of their being here, A, and B, the open acceptance and acknowledgement of that fact. Jen, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, this is an exciting topic. And again, if anyone may not have seen some of the information or wishes more evidence and may be new to World Puja and or the Disclosure Project, please visit the website disclosureproject.org, because this is the evidence and this is the knowledge that we're talking about. And if you want some more hard facts, please go there. And we're glad for you to see everything that's been compiled over the last 20 years.
Yes, excellent. There are three issues here, or three kind of sources of information that we're going to sort of use for this discussion. One is the fact we are being visited. Therefore, certain technologies and information has to be already extant so that they can visit us. So one of the issues is there a willingness, or will there be a willingness for the ETs to share knowledge? It may not be all their knowledge initially, but obviously since they're here, maybe sharing some knowledge of how they got here, et cetera, will be sort of one issue. So that's willingness of ETs to share knowledge. The second sort of source of information and speculation on our part is multiple reports of contactees over the many years, decades, if not longer, on what contactees have observed and what they were told by the ETs with whom they spoke. The third issue is that there's also the willingness of human groups to share what they have already learned and have kept suppressed for many decades. We assume that once disclosure is fully acknowledged and accepted by media and human governments, political issues, and the peoples, that the covert groups, the control groups, whatever you want to call the groups that have a lot of this knowledge, will start to come out in the open with some of the information that they already have. So when this happens, there's going to be a multitude of sources of information that will affect all of us in almost every area of human endeavor. Today we're going to talk, sort of speculate, if you will, in 4 or 5 areas here dealing with this. One is dealing with transportation, anti-gravity and other issues. Second would be energy production. Third, communications, superluminal communications, consciousness communications, medical issues, and the actual nature of consciousness itself. So these are 4 or 5 areas that we want to sort of touch on in various amounts of detail. And we expect that once this full disclosure acknowledgement occurs, that there will be significant changes in all of these areas of human endeavor. And as I've said in the past and will continue to say at that point, there will be no going back in terms of our human society on this planet. And ultimately, this will be a very good thing. So
absolutely.
So with that introduction to the topic, if you will, let's sort of bounce ahead. I have to start this conversation here with a couple quotes, if I can put my fingers on them, from a couple scientists, one a biologist and one a physicist. And this represents the kind of, and I'm not sure whether this represents their true beliefs or what they've been told to say, but it's a rather interesting, rather dire view on the human condition, if you will. And what I'm just giving you this as an example of what some scientists have said and what is totally wrong. It's sort of sad that they felt this. The French biologist Jacques Monod wrote, "The ancient covenant is in pieces. Man at last knows that he is alone in the unfeeling immensity of the universe, out of which he has emerged only by chance. Neither his destiny nor his duty have been written down." So this is a biologist who decides that, we're a freak of nature, if you will, and there's nobody else out there. Steven Weinberg, a well-known physicist, noted, "The more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it seems pointless." Another dire view of the human condition. Well, we have a very different view of that, and the evidence points to the very strong evidence in information points that it is a very different view. It's a universe teeming with life. Intelligent races are visiting us, and the future for humankind, once this open disclosure occurs is awesome. So with that little further introduction, let's move on here. Jan, you want to add anything at this point, Jan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as we all know, everything is a choice. It's a choice on the part of humanity. It's a choice in what we choose to request of our leaders, and it's a choice of the actions our leaders take. But just as in anything, we can look at the glass as half empty or half full. And interestingly, we have the opportunity to make it either way, I believe.
It's totally true. Well, one of the things that I need to sort of mention here at this point, something that's been discussed by Dr. Greer many times, but I'll sort of review this then, the secrecy issue, the reasons for secrecy. And it really, there's a major fear among, I just continue to call them the control groups on this planet, control our energy technologies, the petro-Nazis, the oil industry people, et cetera, is that they have a massive fear of disruptive technologies. Now, what do I mean by disruptive technologies? The history of humankind has been one of disruptive technologies. And in multiple areas, and I'll just look at two areas here, that of transportation and energy sources. In the world of transportation, what a transformational or a disruptive technology does is it changes the paradigm of human society operations in that particular area. For example, in transportation, the earliest transportation was basically walking, human feet. We moved on to horses, various other animals of transportation, elephants, donkeys, etc. And finally, the wheel was developed. Then we moved on to some other source of energy, other than animal energy. Steam engines, petrol engines. Finally, we developed airplanes, rockets, boats, sailboats, powered boats, etc. That's where we are today. A disruptive transportation technology would be something of anti-gravity, alien reproduction vehicles, teleportation, technologies that we use a totally different physics than something based upon fossil fuels or electrical processes. Or at least electrical processes in a very, very different mode. So a disruptive process, a disruptive technology that will no longer require the use of fossil fuels for transportation. Now that is a major change and one that can't happen soon enough. In the source of energies, we see the same sort of thing, going from burning wood for fire, water power, coal, all sort of heat-type things right on up to nuclear stuff, which is still nuclear power plants are still basically heating stuff to turn turbines. But then we go into technologies extracting energy from the quantum vacuum state, other kinds of perhaps radiant energy and anti-gravity energy sources that will affect and totally change our energy paradigm on this planet. So the bottom line is the secrecy issue, in a nutshell, fear of disruptive technologies and loss of control of the financial control of this planet, and those who in control like to stay in control.
Yeah, really special interest. And that goes back to what we were talking about, the fact that even though this information has been disclosed, the fact that the media and certain officials of both corporations and some governmental officials don't recognize it is because of corruption. They want things to stay in status quo for their special interest, which is why they're there. So we just see that things need to progress. It's interesting what you've talked about basically addresses physics as well as several other fields. But if you think about it, Newtonian physics was very important and was the norm, but finally was built upon, and quantum physics was discovered. It was there all along. It's just that a national progression needed to be made, and it was. So this is really what we're talking about, the next step.
Right. So Jen mentioned the role of the press and the media and everything else controlling these things. And once again, a quick example, which I just ran across recently, but I think it really, in a nutshell, demonstrates the disclosure issue. We've talked about disclosure having happened but not, and it's especially concerning when a well-known public figure speaks out about it and is essentially dissed. And this particular example I want to give you occurred in July of 2008 when Edgar Mitchell, one of the very early astronauts in Apollo 14, was one of the first people to walk on the moon, and a well-known person in the world because of that very fact. He said in 2008, "I happen to be privileged enough to be in on the fact that we have been visited on this planet and the UFO phenomena is real. It has been covered up by governments for some time now." Now, this was picked up around the world as because of who he was and what he was saying. And you'd think that this would be addressed as, wow. Well, example is CNN. It could not be ignored completely. As somebody noted, it was then qualified to go into the second level where it would be ridiculed or marginalized. CNN did their best to ridicule it, as they might do. And in this case, they introduced Edgar Mitchell's comments, played the musical theme from the X-Files, showed cartoon images of little green men on CNN, and at the end of a little brief presentation, smiled and went to a commercial, relegating the story to sort of a comic relief thing. So this is one of our major, quote, major news sources, ridiculing of Edgar Mitchell.
A former astronaut.
A former astronaut. So as long as that's the modus operandi among the media, it is no wonder that the media and the politicians will not accept this. So that's kind of where we are on the planet at this point. We don't know what the role of the ETs will be once this disclosure happens, whether they will stand back and see how the humans respond to it, whether they will interact, stand on the podium with leaders per se and talk about the future. We do not have a good feeling about what role they will play, because it's going to be a very dynamic, changing system once this information becomes totally out there, if you will.
Well, we can understand that if we, for example, visited a place of, in the jungle where we thought individuals might be afraid of us, not developed in the way we are, we would be very careful going in, hopefully, meeting with, say, a new tribe, as we should be. And as they should be too. So again, we don't need to see this just in the way we would handle something, but it would be helpful to look at it in that social aspect.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. And as I said, we don't know the role of the leaders, our leaders. The press will say what they're told to say. We already know that's the case. We don't also know what the role of the covert projects in this, in terms of dealing with the press and coming out, for example, and saying, "Oh, we've known this for decades, but we didn't want to tell you people because you might be scared, or the religions of the world are going to fall apart," etc. And we don't know whether they're going to plan to spin it. In fact, there's a good evidence that they plan to spin it as an evil alien approach and fear-based, fear-mongering. The movies that have been out in the last decade or so, for the most part, have been all fear-based, evil aliens eating us for lunch, that type of thing. So that may continue to go on until people sort of realize what's happening. Well, let's talk about some of the possible technologies and move on to that. Again, this is speculative information, but there's some good basis for some of the speculation. For example, we'll start with transportation technologies. That's probably an easy one. The technology to travel between star systems will obviously, a priori, will include an understanding of physics necessary to bypass normal speed of light limitations, which are just too slow. Present-day physics has trouble with that, although some sort of up-to-date, forward-leaning looking physics suggests that this is definitely a possible thing to do. We just don't understand how to do it yet, at least among the public science. But once disclosure has occurred and people accept the fact that ETs are visiting the planet Earth, one of the first questions we're going to be asked is, how do they get here? And as Dr. Greer has so often said, they aren't using Exxon jet fuel to get here. They're using advanced physics and technologies to bypass the speed of light, essentially, or go around it, or I won't go into it right now, but anyway, using physics that we don't normally use for our transportation. And so if that's the case, and it is the case, how do they get here? How do they get here so fast? Could we be using these technologies to do things on this planet? And what kind of energy are they using? So there's a linkage here between the transportation issue and our energy technologies.
Right. Imagine if we understood and developed in the public domain anti-gravity technologies. Well, first of all, we would not need surface roads. Think about it. We would not have to dig up arable land and put down asphalt and drive on it. I realize stuff like this has been done in science fiction, but think of it as a science fact. Besides not tearing up the environment, we would also be able to just maintain a lot of the beauty of the planet. We wouldn't have to blow up mountains to get to fuel sources. We wouldn't have to cut down trees. I think it's very exciting. This aspect is very exciting, what could be done in the transportation field, because also these technologies do not have toxic emissions. So this is a very exciting aspect of what can be. Right, Ted?
Absolutely. And, you mentioned tearing up the roads. Just an aside on that, this doesn't mean you wouldn't have walkways or local roads around houses or this sort of thing. But in terms of any long-distance transportation, this could be done using anti-gravity or counter-gravity technologies that, if the ETs are here and all the evidence from thousands upon thousands of reports by people around this planet have seen, photographed the technology in action. So it exists. And as we also know, again, back to the covert groups, we also know through multiple witnesses that these technologies have been developed through a combination of our own science, going back to T. Townsend Brown and others, right on up to the present, coupled with reverse engineering of extraterrestrial craft that have been shot down or have crashed. So we already have, and this is where the role of the covert groups is going to play a major role in how fast we can accept and utilize some of these technologies. We already have a lot of these technologies or understand them, at least at an initial stage or stage well enough advanced for us to utilize them in advanced aircraft and systems. So we don't have to start from scratch on this. Humans have already developed some of these things. It's just that this is being kept under wraps from the human population because of the petro-Nazis, or as Jim Marrs has noted, it's a major criminal act by covert control groups to extract monies from the public and control global economies, which is why this is being kept secret. So how fast they release this information, admit that they have been involved in this with the public's money for the last half century or more, is really going to play a role in how fast this becomes available to those of us on the ground, still on the ground, I should say.
Right. So the physics is there, and it's already been discovered. It's essentially what you're saying, but it hasn't been open to the masses, and that's the unfortunate part. Another thing, if I may, on the transportation issue, which is very exciting, because if we know other civilizations travel with these mechanisms, we know that the time involved in traveling is much less. And so that is very exciting, thinking about what's possible. I mean, now people take hours to go to an airport, delays, flying, and also safety issue, actually, with with fossil fuel. It's exciting to think of the possibility of how much less time people will spend in traveling, unless they wish to, right?
That would be a major thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it would make it would open travel to more people more easily. We have a diverse, wonderful group of civilizations on this planet, and it would be nicer if people could be in touch better. The Internet has opened that up a lot, as we've seen. It's been amazing and wonderful. So the human family would certainly prosper by this.
Absolutely. And we can probably come back to the transportation in a moment again, but move on to the energy sector. We've already mentioned that. We've already mentioned that's part of the reason why this is being kept under wraps by the groups who want to continue to make money off the present paradigm. But energy technologies from Tesla, and we certainly talked about this at length in the Orion project. Both Dr. Greer and Jan and I have already spoken about this a number of times. There are technologies that have been developed that deal with extracting energy from the quantum vacuum state that do not require fossil fuels or hydropower plants or other wind power or solar power or other techniques that we're presently using today. These techniques will allow us to develop and produce energy at the site where it's needed, on a per household, per business, per location issue, as opposed to large, massive structures and grids that break down, et cetera. So that's another hope, that this information also will come out because people will realize that ETs who have traveled here are not using Exxon jet fuel or somebody else's jet fuel to get here. They have developed those technologies, so they must work. And if they do work, why can't we have them, and where have we been? So that will also come out. Now, it's going to take a while for these things to be accepted and widely used, but just knowing that's the case will give this planet hope, to look into the future in a positive sense instead of a sort of a depressed, there's no hope in the future feeling.
It's interesting that a lot of technology, solar, wind, are great and can be used in some places but aren't available to the entire planet. Some people don't get enough wind. Some people don't get enough light. We do need to find something that everyone can use, and that's the beauty of these new technologies that we will progress to. Interestingly, with everything going on with energy, I think it's important to point out a nuclear plant costs something like 6 times the cost of what it costs to put solar power in, and it comes with the requisite problem of the fact that the waste does not degrade for years and years and years and will be around, plus the problems, as we've seen in Japan. Don't even have to go into that because people know that it's a very concerning problem. To find something that is safer and sustainable and available to all, that should be our goal as far as the technology. Because there are too many people on this planet and too many places, and actually too much misery that needs to be, and poverty that needs to be cleaned up and could be cleaned up with good energy sources to clean people's water, to fuel their and to fuel their environments.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's move on here. Excellent. Let's move on here. I'd like to move into the communications issue a little bit because once again, the technology traveling between star systems would also include an understanding of physics necessary to allow superluminal communications. In other words, faster than the speed of light. Right now, if the speed of light is very, very limited, even for the nearest star system, a little less than 4 light years, it would take 8 light years almost to have any kind of conversation, which is, hello, I made it, oh fine, glad to hear that. It would take 8 years back and forth. So that just does not work in terms of the long range transportation travel between the stars. It doesn't make any sense for an advanced civilization visiting our planet to use speed of light technology, radio technology, which is one of the mistaken tenets of the SETI program, but we went into that at a previous time. We won't go into that. We talked about that last week, I believe, or last time we spoke. So here we go. Communication, interestingly enough, now this is where, again, the media and some of the control stuff keeps this into the non-consideration mode. Wikipedia, interestingly, notes that superluminal communication is considered impossible because communication is considered by science to be impossible. Most articles in this category are from the work of fiction. So Wikipedia, in its articles, doesn't even describe or discuss the science that's going on. And since the early 2000s, there's been a multiple number of scientific papers discussing possible faster than speed of light phenomena, new class of scientific phenomena, classified impossible by present scientists, and it goes on and on. So there's a number of scientists that are actually looking at various technologies that would allow faster than light or superluminal communications. Now, the interesting thing is that sort of human science taking today's physics and extrapolating a little bit on it. Now, the interesting thing is what we've learned in our dealings in communications with ETs, as well as listening to multiple witnesses and talking with multiple people about it, is that the ETs most likely don't use radio antennas, i.e. the SETI program. They don't even use some other sort of physics. They really use the mind and consciousness. After all, remember that Edward Schrödinger, the great physicist, who in the 20s noted, and this is the actual quote that he said, multiplicity is only apparent in truth. There is only one mind. In other words, people are looking at the universe very complex, and he's basically saying, in truth, there is only one mind. And he noted also, quantum physics thus reveals a basic oneness of the universe. And the ETs, as well as humans, have learned to access that one mind, which allowing them actually to communicate, or in terms of remote viewers, actually view objects at great distance in a real time without the limitations of a time delay or the speed of light. This can be enhanced further and with consciousness-assisted technology, reported to be used in black projects. Dr. Greer spoke about this in his one of his first book, Extraterrestrial Contact. It's also mentioned by some of the witnesses in the Disclosure Project. And an interesting two examples of this kind of mind communication, I think, are definitely worth noting. Dr. Greer speaks in the book Extraterrestrial Contact, The Evidence and Implications. He talks about a witness who 35 years ago, which would have been in the 60s, because he wrote this in the 90s, in the 60s, was working on a covert research project, and this scientist at Bell Labs was given an extraterrestrial communication device about the size of a grapefruit. He was told to reverse engineer and figured out how it works, so, of course, covert projects could use it. When the scientist received the object, it began to speak to him directly in his awareness of thought. In other words, it was using mind communication. Obviously, the scientist was rather startled by this whole process, and the device told him that people had asked him to study the device, had malice in their hearts, and that the scientists should destroy the device, which he did when he, quote, accidentally overheated the device in an experiment and it destroyed it. Now, that is one example of extraterrestrial technologies that ultimately can be used, that they use for communications, and that we ultimately could use. Another example of that, which goes along the same trends, is a small book by a former sergeant in the Army by the name, or Air Force, by the name of Dan Sherman. The book's called Above Black, an insider account of alien contact and government cover-up. He was trained in mental or intuitive communications by the Air Force in a long training program, and then ultimately communicated with ETs, taking numbers and information from them. It was strictly numbers. At one point, however, in his communications process, he found that he broke through to a slightly higher plane, which allowed him to form questions, receive answers, and visual images from the ET. The ET that he was communicating with was very surprised that this human could operate on this, quote, higher plane, and had no problem communicating some information to him at that time. That occurred back in the 90s when this happened. So, the ETs communicate using mind stuff and global or universal mind, if you will, and also in some of the human covert projects, we figured out how to do that. That's kind of amazing and wonderful to be aware of that, in spite of the fact that the general scientific community does not understand this. And this leads us into more of the consciousness issues, and I'll let Jan mention that or discuss that, as well as the medical implications of disclosure.
I think it's fascinating that story that you said about the information that gentleman got from the device that said, "Destroy me because people would use me for ill." I think that's a very fascinating and hopeful story, and hopefully we will continue to use these things for good. And as as the consciousness in general on this planet rises to a healthier and more open level, I foresee things like this happening in a good way. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, I'm very excited about the medical implications. Basically now, as a physician, the model I see that we use is to treat disease. Interestingly, for some time I traveled around the world in the 90s and early part of the 2000s, visiting natural healers, holistic healers, healers in places and in different cultures, just to see how they healed, because they didn't have access to X-ray, CT scans, all the wonderful things, blood tests that I have access to. And I found in many of these cultures, as many people know, there was a holistic approach to the person. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just body, but mind as well, mind, emotion, and body. And all of these things were treated in an individual to help an individual either get well or stay well. Interestingly, in some civilizations, this is just a side fact, individuals pay physicians to keep them healthy, and if they get sick, they don't pay them. So it's interesting. I think that's just an interesting approach to keeping to health. But you mentioned you were talking about consciousness and the interaction of everyone. Interestingly, there's work that's been done. There are double-blind studies by Dr. Larry Dawsey, and these studies were done. They showed the effect of distal prayer for people who were ill or had surgery, who didn't even know they were being prayed for. And then they checked healing rates, the development of post-operative infections, etc. And there's very good information really from this work. It's Dr. Dawsey, D-O-S-S-E-Y, has published many books about it, that there is some value to the positive thoughts and prayers of people, that is consciousness, that is put to use in a way to help people. Also, I remember reading way back before Dr. Oz became popular about Dr. Oz. He's the cardiovascular surgeon who has a very successful program who is brought to public knowledge by Oprah Winfrey. But interestingly, he's a cardiovascular surgeon. And I remember reading many years ago, before he was even on her show, that he would have people praying for the patients he'd operated on. And he would do, again, these double-blind studies where The people didn't know they were being prayed for or who was praying for them, but he checked the groups who were being prayed for and those who weren't particularly, in this study, and they did better. They had less postoperative infections. They healed better. These are scientific studies, and I found that fascinating. Well, I think we have a lot more to go in that field, but I'm excited that people are already starting. So there's a real science there that we need to investigate and continue with. Of course, life extension. Many people are interested in extending their lives. Personally, I'm interested in people being healthy and happy during their lives. So whatever one's interest is, I see that the things that do cut people down, especially in the prime of life, that shouldn't, we can start evaluating these things. There's certainly work done now on diet, exercise, all these things. But once we turn our attention to being proactive about everyone's health, I think there's much to be discovered. There's a lot of work, very fascinating work being done with stem cells, particularly autologous stem cells. That is, stem cells taken from one's own body. And there's a vast wealth of information about many things that are being healed. I know of some work done that is literally saving people's limbs. People scheduled for amputations of limbs due to poor circulation or diabetic illness, which has led to gangrene. People's limbs are being saved. If this is being done now, imagine what can be done with new technologies. Again, that investigating and finding out what's there, really discovering what's there, just like physics. It's there to discover. No one's invented it. People invent machines, but the physics itself is there. I think now one thing I'm very concerned about are the superbugs that are in hospitals from the overuse of antibiotics, and I think that this is an area that we can give a lot of time to as we move on, and again, look at medicine, look at all the possibilities with medicine. Now, unfortunately, some of the things we as a society do tend to create more problems. I'm excited, Ted, about where we're going with medicine, and there's nothing to say that we just don't have a fabulous future waiting for everyone. You may have read recently about a young man who was paralyzed, and there was a robotic device he put on his legs, and this man was able to stand and take a few steps. He'd not been able to stand since he was paralyzed. This was just in the news a few days ago. Yeah. So, yeah, forgive me if I can't pinpoint the exact place where this happened, but it was fascinating. Again, we have so much we can do in the way of engineering because of all these things that I've mentioned that have already been done. So I think once we have opened up, once we've opened up all these new technologies, there's a lot of hope and a lot of excitement for people who either have diseases now or will develop them. So I'm very excited to be alive at this time, just watching what's happening now. But I foresee much greater things opening up because, again, you're talking about technologies that are just waiting to be engineered and discovered.
I'm going to add a comment here is that although I'm not a medical doctor, I'm trying to put the understanding here into the broader disclosure process. And it's my own feeling, and speaking for myself here, is my own feeling, is the following, that right now the medicine, a lot of the medical issues that Jan was talking about here, we're sort of beating around the edges. We're discovering little tricks on how to do things. I don't feel that the total true breakthroughs will come until we truly understand what consciousness, human life, living consciousness is about. And once we understand the linkages between the physical nature of a human being and the spiritual nature of a human being, and how those two interrelate on a, shall we say, scientific basis, to be able to use that knowledge then to cure the body, etc. So I think you see where I'm going here with this.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping and I'm expecting that the ETs will have some of that knowledge which they ultimately share with us. And once we start to piece that together, we can take what we've learned in terms of some of the physical cures, if you will, and coupled with an understanding of consciousness and effect much greater cures. Now, I'm mentioning this only because there have been numerous reports of people, contactees, interfacing with ETs who have, quote, cured them of some incurable disease. And you've probably read about some of those, the people listening to this program. I've spoken actually to several people who have had this happen. One friend from the country to the north here had in breast cancer and was diagnosed with it with all the present modern-day technologies, major breast cancer. She had a contact with some ETs and with ETs, spiritual beings, orbs, et cetera, et cetera. Can't remember all the details of it, but bottom line was the cancer went into total remission, and she's totally cured today.
I'm aware of that one too. Yeah, yeah, I'm aware of that case, and it's very. I can validate that.
And so what this tells me is that right now it's sort of on a sort of a personal report thing, but it tells me that the ETs have developed and understand again the relationship between consciousness and the human body, and that would make just like Dr. Dorsey is speaking about the role of prayer, which is a spiritual communication thing, with the curing or helping to cure patients who are sick. So that's going to be a major breakthrough. And again, the healthy person who's both healthy and conscious in body is going to live longer, and the life extension issue that Jan mentioned is a very real possibility.
Yeah, and just on a basic level, years ago, plague couldn't be treated, wiped out, much of a continent, but now we have antibiotics for it. We know what causes it. It's just a natural progression of figuring things out. And if there are beings who are just ahead of us evolutionarily, it makes sense that they may have figured some of these things out. So again, it's just a natural progression. It's not magic. It's science. Mm-hmm.
And there are, I might add, this is out of the limb department, but I just read an article today, published recently, about people hypothesizing that human beings, and this is from Crick, who was one of the DNA developers or discoverers, I should say, the helix, double helix, Watson and Crick. But anyway, Crick and others wrote that they were speculating that there is a part of the human DNA that actually is ET or extraterrestrial DNA. They were hypothesizing this because there's a lot of DNA that we don't know its function, its purpose, what have you, and we've all heard that we don't use all of our DNA in anything that we know about. And yet, in some human beings, we see some superhuman capabilities, this communications, mental communications issue, super strength under certain conditions, remote viewing, as I mentioned, and other capabilities that are ET-like. I'll put quotes around that. So that's an interesting, and that's purely speculation, but we might learn more about that once we've actually had contact with the ETs, and there's a sharing of knowledge in a public manner.
That's exciting. I hadn't heard that. Thank you for sharing.
I'll send you the article.
Okay. Okay.
So I think the last thing, and this we've sort of been touching on this thing, is again back to the consciousness, but how it relates to, and this is non-technology, but the religious changes. And one of the little background here, one of the major reasons given by the control groups for secrecy is that they're quote afraid that the religions of the world couldn't handle knowing that we're not alone, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole bunch of discussion about that. So, which is really just a prevarication, because it's my feeling that most of the people of the world could handle it quite well at this point. In fact, some of the major religions, the Catholic Church and others, have talked about ETs and the beings from other planets, and they're part of God's children, and et cetera. However, expect that there will be a change, or either a new acceptance or a change in our religions, how we view human man's spiritual nature, and how we view the spiritual nature of the ETs. Hopefully they know a little bit more than we do, and we can learn.
Yeah.
But
the underpinning,
either.
Yeah, I think the underpinnings of most religion, if one goes back to the source, I am told that most of them, in the beginning, really, their goal was to bring people together in the respect of human dignity and life. So, hopefully, people will understand that. And those who are still afraid of the ETs for religions that, not for religions, but for any reasons that some people think might be religious, it may really not make any more sense than being afraid of people from Europe, people from Africa, or people from the United States. They're beings. And there's should be the possibility of all beings to work together and get along. That's what I understand most religions are really trying to do from their beginnings, helping people sustain themselves in difficult times. Well, these are difficult times. Mm-hmm. So I look forward to this all this information being discussed and acted upon by everyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, just a sort of a couple comments to wrap things up here. Unless you have some more thoughts we're almost
right.
at
Go
an hour here. What we're seeing here and talking about is that once openly acknowledged disclosure has occurred, there will be some massive changes in multiple areas of human endeavors. And how fast those changes occur depends on how fast that information becomes available. And as I noted earlier, the information is going to come from multiple sources. The ETs themselves, in terms of sharing what they've learned, obviously they're technologically advanced to the human race in terms of their abilities to travel among the stars. Although people on this planet have talked about our ability to travel among the stars as well, but that's covert black projects wrapped up in those. So we expect to see the ETs sharing information with us, the covert groups who have a lot of this information, advanced information, already understood, or at least partly understood, starting to come out in the open and share what they've learned, as well as people on this planet, the contactees, sharing more what they've learned and sharing a sense that they aren't laughed at or snickered at, or it's just a small group of people who are listening to them. So the three sources of information, and hopefully this information will all come together and be shared in an open manner on this planet, and the human race can move ahead, because at the present we are on an unsustainable course with our human society on this planet, as I think everybody is aware of here.
Right. And we will continue to do our work to get the word out, and we appreciate everyone who supports that.
I just have a couple final comments. Once, as we always mentioned here, the declassified.org is a good place on the web, www.disclosureproject.org. is a good place to find out information about a number of witnesses who have talked about this. The www.cseti, that's CSETI.org website deals with contact with ETs in the field and through other readings and documents information. The Orion Project, www.theorionproject.org, also deals with some of the energy technologies that Dr. Bravo and I work on extensively. And I might add that at least some of the topics that we've discussed today, I will be presenting in much more detail at the MUFON conference to be held in Orange County the end of July this year, at a conference that is going to be discussing, the speakers are going to be discussing issues of what are the implications of full disclosure on this planet, and how is the human race going to be dealing with some of these issues. I'll be talking about issues dealing with some of the technology issues that we spoke about today. So at this point, Jan, do you have anything more you'd like to add at this point?
No, I appreciate the talk today and everyone listening, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, and we'd like to, as always, we'd like to thank the World Puja Network for hosting these conversations with Dr. Steven Greer. And thank you all for listening, and hopefully you'll hear from us in a few weeks again. Goodbye for now.